Maya sat under her favorite oak tree in the park. The sun felt warm on her skin, and the leaves above made a soft, gentle sound as they moved in the breeze. She felt calm and happy, which didn't happen often in her busy, noisy life. Her sketchbook lay open on her lap, and her pencil moved slowly across the page. She was drawing everything around her: the kids laughing, the parents talking quietly on benches, and the birds singing somewhere far away. Everything felt peaceful and nice, like it should always stay this way. In her mind, Maya could still hear her mom's voice. Her mom always reminded her to stay careful and watch what was happening around her. Maya had heard it so many times that it became a habit. She knew the world wasn't always as kind as it looked. Her mom wanted her to understand that not everything safe seemed that way. But today, in the park, Maya felt sure everything was okay. This place felt safe, and she believed it really was. All around her, life kept moving. The kids kept running and playing games like tag. Parents were talking and laughing softly. The air felt nice, and everything seemed normal. There wasn't anything scary or strange happening. Maya let out a small, happy sigh as she focused on her drawing. She sketched the tall tree in front of her. Its branches stretched high toward the sky, like arms reaching out for a hug. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya relaxed. She didn't let the worries that always followed her ruin this moment. The park felt like a safe and quiet place where she could just be herself. She smiled a little as she kept drawing, trying to make this peaceful afternoon last forever in her sketchbook. The calm feeling in the park didn't last long. Maya was finishing the last details of her drawing when something caught her eye. A group of teenagers was hanging out near the edge of the park. They were laughing and talking, just like any other group of kids. But something felt strange. Maya noticed a man walking toward them. He looked serious, his eyes focused like he was searching for something. He wasn't just any man. He looked like an FBI agent. He had a dog with him, a big one, and he held its leash tightly. The dog wasn't like the happy dogs Maya was used to seeing in the park. This dog looked tense, its ears up and its nose sniffing the air, like it was ready to find something or someone. The agent walked right up to the teenagers. Maya couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could tell he wasn't being friendly. His voice was sharp, and his face didn't have a smile. The teenagers stopped laughing. They stood still, looking uncomfortable, like they weren't sure what to do. Maya felt uneasy as she watched. The teens weren't doing anything wrong. They weren't causing trouble. They were just sitting together, talking and enjoying the day. So why was the agent looking at them like they had done something bad? The dog sniffed around them, its tail stiff. The agent kept asking questions. Maya didn't know what he was saying, but she could see the way the teens shifted nervously, glancing at each other. They looked scared. Maya felt a knot in her stomach. It didn't seem fair. The teenagers didn't deserve to be treated like this. But Maya had seen moments like this before. Her mom had told her that sometimes people are judged unfairly, just because of how they look or where they're from. Maya had always known it was wrong, but now she was seeing it happen right in front of her. She wanted to look away, to go back to her drawing and forget about it. But she couldn't. The peaceful feeling from earlier was gone, replaced by a heavy tension in the air. It didn't feel right, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something about this moment would stay with her for a long time. She closed her sketchbook and hugged it tightly. The park didn't feel as safe anymore. Maya felt the air around her change. It wasn't just in her head, something was different. The agent wasn't looking at the teenagers anymore. He was looking at her. His eyes locked with hers, cold and serious, like he was trying to figure her out. It was a look that made Maya's stomach twist. Her hand froze, her pencil hovering above her sketchbook. She didn't dare move. She couldn't even look away. Her heart started beating faster, and she didn't know why. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just sitting there drawing in the park like she always did. But the way he stared at her made her feel small, like she was in trouble for something she didn't even know about. The agent started walking toward her. His dog stayed at his side, silent but alert. Its sharp eyes kept darting between Maya and the agent. Maya felt her chest tighten as they got closer. The dog didn't bark or growl, but it looked ready for something, like it was waiting for a signal. "Are you alone?" the agent asked suddenly. His voice was cold and flat, like he wasn't really asking, just testing her. Maya blinked, caught off guard. Her mouth felt dry, but she managed to nod. Yes, she whispered. Her voice was so soft she wasn't sure he even heard her. The agent didn't look satisfied. He glanced down at her sketchbook, then back at her face. His stare was heavy, and Maya felt like he was searching for something she didn't have. I'm just drawing, she said quietly, her voice shaking. I'm not bothering anyone. He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, watching her. His silence made her feel even worse. Her hands started to tremble, and she clutched her sketchbook tighter, as if it could protect her from whatever this was. The agent took another step closer, and Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She felt trapped, like she couldn't run or hide. Why was he focused on her? She didn't understand what she had done to make him look at her like this. The dog's ears twitched, and its sharp eyes stayed on her. Maya tried to stay calm, but it was so hard. She kept telling herself she hadn't done anything wrong. But the agent's cold stare made her doubt everything. Time seemed to stretch out forever. Maya wanted to say more, to explain that she was just a girl sitting in the park enjoying the day. But she couldn't find the words. Her voice felt stuck, and her fear kept growing. The peaceful day she had loved so much was gone. All that was left was the sound of her racing heartbeat and the weight of the agent's eyes on her. The air between Maya and the agent felt heavier with every passing second. She could feel her heart pounding so loudly it was all she could hear. The agent's cold stare never left her. She wanted to explain, to tell him she wasn't doing anything wrong, but no words came out. Her throat felt tight, and fear gripped her like a heavy weight. You're acting suspiciously, the agent said, his voice low and firm. Maya froze. The words hit her like a slap. Suspicious? How could she be suspicious? She was just a girl drawing in the park. But the way he said it, like she had already done something wrong, made her chest tighten even more. Her hands shook as she held her sketchbook close to her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. She felt trapped, like there was no way out of this. Then, the agent gave a sharp command to his dog. Maya barely had time to react. The dog lunged at her, its teeth flashing in the sunlight. Its growls were loud and terrifying. Maya screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the dog's snarls. She stumbled backward, trying to get away, but her legs wouldn't move fast enough. She fell to the ground, the hard dirt scraping her hands and knees. The dog was right in front of her now, its teeth bared, its eyes wild. Maya's whole body shook as she tried to push herself back, but there was nowhere to go. The dog's growls filled her ears, and all she could see was its massive body looming over her. She screamed again, louder this time, hoping anyone, would help. But when she looked around, the people in the park just stood there. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They looked as frozen as she felt. The agent didn't stop the dog. He just stood there, watching, as if he didn't care. Maya's breath came in short, panicked gasps. She tried to crawl away, but her hands slipped on the ground. The dog was so close now, its hot breath on her face. Maya felt tears sting her eyes. She didn't understand why this was happening. She didn't understand what she had done to deserve this. Her mind screamed at her to run, to fight, and to do something, but she couldn't move. Fear had taken over her body completely. All she could do was stare into the dog's eyes and pray that someone would help her before it was too late. Maya felt her chest tighten, like she couldn't breathe. The agent stood just a few feet away, watching her. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. The dog kept growling, its sharp teeth bared, so close to her face. Maya's screams filled the air, but no one came to help. The park that had been so full of life just moments ago was now silent. The people who had been talking and laughing were frozen. They stood far away, watching, their eyes wide with fear. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody did anything. Maya kept screaming, but her voice was hoarse. Her throat burned from the effort, but it didn't matter. The dog's snarls were louder than her cries. It felt like the whole world had gone still except for her and the animal inches from her face. The agent just stood there, staring at her. His face showed nothing, no anger, no kindness, no regret. It was like he was watching a scene in a movie, not a girl terrified on the ground. Maya couldn't believe it. How could he just stand there? How could he let this happen? Her body shook uncontrollably. She wanted to move, to get away, but she couldn't. Her legs felt like they didn't work, and her hands were too weak to push herself up. All she could do was lie there, shaking and crying, hoping the nightmare would end. Finally, after what felt like forever, the agent spoke a command. His voice was sharp, and the dog immediately stepped back. It didn't stop looking at her, though. Its growls grew quieter, but it still seemed ready to attack again. Maya stayed on the ground, too scared to move. Her whole body trembled, and tears rolled down her cheeks, mixing with the dirt on her face. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. The agent looked down at her, his face still cold and unreadable. "You were acting suspiciously," he said, his voice flat, like that explained everything. Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. Suspicious? How? She had been sitting under a tree, sketching in her notebook. She hadn't done anything wrong. She wanted to yell at him, to ask why he had let things go so far, but her voice was gone. She stayed on the ground, her hands gripping her sketchbook tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. The agent didn't say anything else. He just stood there, his words hanging in the air like they were supposed to mean something. Maya's mind raced with confusion and fear. She had never felt so small, so powerless. All she could think was that she had done nothing to deserve this. And yet, here she was shaken, terrified, and unsure if she would ever feel safe again. Maya sat on the ground, shaking, holding her sketchbook tightly against her chest. Tears streamed down her face, and her body wouldn't stop trembling. Everything felt unreal, like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. Then she heard a familiar voice calling her name. "Maya! Maya!" Her mother came running toward her. A passerby had told her what happened, and now she was here. When Maya's mom saw her sitting on the ground, so scared and fragile, her heart broke. She dropped to her knees beside Maya and wrapped her arms around her. "Maya, what happened?" her mom asked softly, her voice full of worry. Maya couldn't speak. The words wouldn't come out. She just clung to her mom, holding on as if letting go would make everything worse. Her mom stroked her hair and whispered, "It's okay. I'm here. You're safe now." After a moment, Maya's mom looked around. Her eyes landed on the agent, who was still standing nearby, his face calm like nothing had happened. Her mom's expression changed. The worry in her face turned into anger. She stood up, holding Maya close as she faced him. "What did you do to my daughter?" she demanded, her voice steady but filled with anger. The agent barely looked at her. His face stayed blank, like he didn't care. "It's nothing," he said, waving his hand like it was no big deal. "Just a misunderstanding." Maya's mom stared at him, her hands clenched into fists. "A misunderstanding? You terrified my daughter. She was sitting here, minding her own business." The agent didn't respond. He didn't even seem to hear her. Without another word, he turned and walked away, the dog following at his side. He didn't say sorry. He didn't look back. He just left like nothing had happened. Maya's mom knelt back down beside her. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said softly, pulling Maya into another hug. "He's gone now. You're safe." But Maya didn't feel safe. The park that had once felt like her sanctuary now felt like a place she couldn't trust. The trees, the laughter, the sunshine, it all felt different, like the peace had been stolen from her. Her mom helped her to her feet. "Let's go home," she said gently. Maya nodded, holding her mom's hand tightly as they walked away. She didn't look back at the oak tree or the spot where she had been sketching. It didn't feel like hers anymore. As they left the park, Maya's heart felt heavy. She wondered if she would ever feel safe again. Back at home, Maya sat on the edge of her bed, hugging her sketchbook tightly. Her room, usually her safe place, felt different now. She stared at the pages of her drawings, but all she could see was the agent's cold eyes and the dog's bared teeth. Her chest still felt tight, and her hands trembled when she tried to hold her pencil. Her mother came into the room and sat down beside her. She placed a gentle hand on Maya's back, rubbing slow, comforting circles. "I know today was scary," her mother said softly. "But you didn't do anything wrong, Maya. This wasn't your fault." Maya looked up at her mom, her eyes still filled with fear and confusion. "Why, Mom?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why did he treat me like that? I wasn't doing anything. I was just drawing." Her mother let out a heavy sigh, her face sad but serious. "Because sometimes the world sees us as a problem, even when we've done nothing wrong," she said. "There are people in this world who judge others unfairly just because of how they look, where they come from, or even because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time." Maya frowned, her heart sinking as she thought back to the park. She remembered how the agent didn't even listen to her, how he didn't care about her fear. She thought about the crowd too, how everyone just stood there watching like they were too scared to help. Why didn't anyone do anything? Maya asked, her voice shaking. They saw what he did. They knew it was wrong, but no one stopped him. Her mother's expression softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "Sometimes people don't act because they're afraid," she said. "They think, it's not my problem, or they don't want to get involved. It's wrong, but it happens. And it hurts, I know." Maya looked down at her sketchbook, her fingers tracing the edge of the cover. She felt a deep ache in her chest, not just from fear, but from something else. It was anger at how unfair it all was. "He didn't even care, Mom," she said, her voice rising. "He didn't even say sorry. He just left like I didn't matter." Her mom nodded slowly. "I know," she said. "And that's the hardest part. People like him, they think they have power over us. They think they can treat us however they want and walk away like nothing happened. But Maya, you do matter. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "It's not fair," she said quietly. "No, it's not," her mom agreed. "But that's why we have to be strong. We have to stand together and make sure people like him don't win. And we can't let them take away our light, Maya. Don't let what happened today stop you from doing what you love." Maya looked at her mom, her heart feeling a little lighter. She didn't know if she could ever go back to the park, but her mom's words gave her a small sense of hope. For the rest of the evening, they sat together. Her mom talked about stories she had heard, about how people stood up to unfairness in small ways and big ways. She told Maya that change didn't always happen right away, but it started with people refusing to give up. As the night went on, Maya's anger turned into something else. It wasn't just fear or sadness anymore. It was determination. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let that agent or anyone else make her feel small again. When her mom kissed her goodnight, Maya picked up her pencil and opened her sketchbook. She started to draw, not the park or the trees, but the dog. She drew its sharp eyes and its bared teeth. Then she drew herself, smaller but standing strong. She wasn't sure what the picture meant yet, but it felt important. It felt like a start. Maya sat at her desk, her sketchbook open in front of her. The pencil in her hand felt heavier than ever before. She stared at the blank page, her heart filled with emotions she didn't know how to put into words. Fear, anger, confusion. They all swirled inside her like a storm she couldn't control. Slowly, her hand began to move. She didn't think about what she was drawing. She just let the pencil do the work. When she looked down, the first thing she saw was the dog. Its sharp teeth, its angry eyes, and the way it had loomed over her. It was so real, so terrifying, that her chest tightened just looking at it. She turned the page and started another drawing. This time it was the agent, his cold, blank face, the way he had stared at her without a hint of kindness, the way he had spoken to her like she was nothing. Maya pressed harder with her pencil, her lines darker and sharper than ever before. The drawings kept coming, page after page filled with images of that day. The dog, the agent, even the crowd of people who had stood there and done nothing. Her hands moved quickly, almost like they had a mind of their own. She didn't stop until her fingers were sore and the pages were smudged with graphite. When she was done, she closed the sketchbook and placed it in the bottom drawer of her desk. She didn't want anyone to see these drawings. They were hers, her way of processing what had happened. But even as she hid them away, she couldn't stop thinking about them. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the dog lunging at her. She heard its growls, felt its hot breath on her skin. And every time, her heart raced and her hands shook. The park, her favorite place, wasn't the same anymore. She couldn't even think about going back there without feeling a knot in her stomach. Maya didn't talk about what happened. Not to her mom, not to anyone. She kept it all inside, locked away like her drawings. But the feelings didn't go away. The fear, the anger, the sadness. They stayed with her, heavy and unshakable. One evening, as she sat in her room, she thought about the park. She remembered how safe it used to feel. The warm sun, the sound of kids laughing, the gentle rustle of the trees. That place had been her sanctuary. But now, it felt like it had been taken from her, stolen by fear and injustice. She opened her sketchbook again, flipping through the dark drawings she had hidden away. As she looked at them, a thought began to form in her mind. She couldn't change what happened. She couldn't go back and undo it. But maybe, just maybe, she could do something about how it made her feel. Maya picked up her pencil again. This time, her lines were softer. She drew the oak tree she used to sit under, its branches reaching up to the sky. She added children playing tag, their laughter almost audible in her mind. She drew herself, too, not scared or small, but strong and standing tall. When she finished, she stared at the page for a long time. It wasn't perfect, but it felt right. It was a reminder of what she wanted to hold on to, even after everything that had happened. Maya didn't know how to fix the world. She didn't know how to stop people like the agent from using their power to hurt others. But she knew one thing. She couldn't let fear take over her life. She couldn't let it silence her. The world wasn't fair. It wasn't always kind. But Maya was determined to keep drawing, to keep expressing herself, even if no one else understood. Her sketches were her voice, and she wouldn't let anyone take that away from her. As she closed her sketchbook and set it on her desk, Maya felt a small spark of hope. The weight of what happened would stay with her, but it wouldn't crush her. Instead, it would push her forward. She didn't know where her path would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't stop trying. She wouldn't stop drawing. She wouldn't stop being herself.